Hello and welcome everybody to this episode of Sakura, Siki, and Strength, where I am so excited to introduce you to two of my dearest friends, Annick and Maureen, who are dialing in from Atlanta, Georgia, and Brussels, Belgium. Thank you so much for being here. We have a friendship that's over 15 years old. We all met in Paris together and studied together, and it's amazing to have you guys with me. And I want to thank you so much. And I'm excited to share some of our stories as well as how we've managed to maintain our relationship over all these years in so many continents. And feel free to introduce yourselves. And Annick, why don't you go first?
Sure. So happy to be here, Assis. Thanks for making me a part of it. So my name's Annick. I am French American. I have a French dad, a Mexican American mom, actually. So she's also bicultural, multicultural, I should say, because she has an American dad and a Mexican mom. And I also, many years later, married a German guy. So now I speak German on top of speaking French and English and knowing some Spanish. But yeah, I moved basically back and forth from France to the US all my life and ended up at a Sciences Po program. I was in California at the time and I just wanted to run back to France as soon as I could. So that's what brought me to meet you guys. Changed my life.
And Maureen.
Definitely, our life hasn't been the same since. I'm Maureen, and I was born and grew up in Brussels, in Belgium. Though I'm not Belgian, I was here for my dad's work in one of the EU institutions, and my dad is like Annick's mum. He's also half and half British, half French, and my mum is Italian. So I grew up also in a multicultural, multinational home, and I went to a European school, like an international school. So also all my friends and a network were like me, sort of expats living in Belgium. Then I did decide to go do my university studies back in the UK. I'd never lived there before, and I probably felt more British than Italian and wanted to explore that. But then the opportunity came up to do a year abroad in Paris, and I jumped at it because I couldn't wait to come back to the continent, but also, to be, I mean, who would say no to a year in Paris? And it changed my life as well. And my deepest friendships have come out of that year.
Yeah, me too, actually. I came from, I was at GW, but my junior year I studied abroad. In my second semester, I went to Sciences Po in Paris, and that's when I met you guys. I will say the adjustment for me was a little bit different because I started off in the second semester, and academically, I just felt like it was very challenging. But friendship-wise, it was like the best experience of my life. And it wasn't just you two, but you guys were a big part of it. It was like just meeting people and still being in that phase where we were challenging ourselves and coming outside of our comfortable boxes and really defining who we were on our own terms. And you both have been part of that journey for me, not just starting there, but even since then. And we're so lucky that we've managed to maintain our friendship. And I'm really excited to share with people stories that we have, but also how we've shown up for each other and how no matter where we've lived in life, our friendship has actually gotten even deeper since then. So thanks so much. So my first question actually would be if you could talk about like your strongest memories that we have together in Paris. Of course, I'm wearing this shirt, Paris Mon Amour, which Maureen actually happened to gift me. And I thought it was appropriate for today. But I'd love to hear what you guys remember of those times when we were together. Well, the appropriate ones.
Right. Oh no, then we've got nothing to say.
I know.
Like, the appropriate comments.
But I think it's exactly what you said, Assis. I mean, I guess it all happened at a time in our life, like we were 20, we'd sort of already experienced living away from home and being at university for a couple of years. But for me, it was really finding people who were like me, both kind of internationally, and maybe we gravitated towards each other for that reason, but also who were kind of studying the same thing, wanted the same thing out of life. We were finding each other, but finding each other together and going in the same path. I just found it such an interesting year. And I wonder if that's what kind of forged our friendships. There was something built in that year. And that is my memory of Paris and of being with the two of you there.
I would say, I mean, for me, it's just like I don't know, kaleidoscope of parties and dinners and cooking together and going on trips also. But I think a bit like what Maureen said, what I loved about it, or what made me just so connected to everybody, is this shared love for la francophonie. We all had that in common, that for whatever reason, whether personal or professional, we were committed to the French language and French culture and having a passion with that. And we were all speaking French too. That's, I think, what is so unique about that time. And maybe the world has now evolved. And I know Sciences Po also has. It's now an Anglophone
Yeah, now they offer
institution.
courses in English, which at our time was not really available.
And we were, yeah, I think when we were together, we were really committed to speaking French. And that, for me, that was a really special connection, because I was always kind of missing that after I had left France and I was back in the US. And to meet all these people who have that shared passion was really, really special.
I find that a really interesting answer, actually, if I'm just jumping back in, Aziz.
Yeah, of course.
Because I feel like that is how we met. And I think we were also able to do that because we had good levels of French. Whereas
Oh, I was like not.
You were not in our class.
I was
You
certainly
faked it
not.
till you
That's a
made it.
different story. I'll get into that later. That was
But
not. I was not in that class.
I mean, I know, Annick, it was the same for you. I very much had two different groups in Sciences Po. And I know we're going to get into this later, like the different groups in your life and who you are in each one. But I think it is indicative that you're my closest group. Actually, it was that kind of bond of being in Paris and loving France and wanting, I think, yes, it was Paris, but it could have been another country. It was wanting to be something more than just the girl who came from a university in the UK or in the States, because
Absolutely.
we are more than that.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with that, Maureen. I think for me too, it was so great because I started learning French when I was in 7th grade, but I was never able to speak French with people outside of school. But it certainly was amazing to be in a place where, obviously, in being in Paris with a bunch of international students, but also mixing with the Parisian students and speaking French every day, thinking in French, going out shopping and living in French. And while I will say grammatically, I don't know if you had this, but my English grammar got worse and my French grammar just was still not improving to the level that it really should have. And, but at some point after like 4 or 5 months, your brain does the switch and then it kind of clicks. But the initial first few months where your brain is adapting and adjusting, it's like you just can't speak either language well. But I was with a bunch of people who were in the same boat and we all understood each other and what we were going through. And the fact that we were surrounded by people who were interested in the same topics academically and intellectually.
True.
I think for me, it was the first time I felt that kind of stimulation and I felt that I wasn't alone in my interests, but just to be in that space was such an honor and it was really incredible.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
my next question is, if you had to describe your cultural identity in 3 words, I mean, has that changed since our Sciences Po days or is it pretty much the same? How would you describe it now?
I could go first. I don't think that it's changed, actually. I think I identify myself the same way as I did 20 years ago. And it's just multifaceted. I feel sometimes a little bit camouflage, like I can kind of blend anywhere, get along with anybody. So yeah, just multifaceted, I would say.
Yeah.
Whereas I think mine also hasn't changed because I suppose it's who we are, but my perception of it has. And I know we'll probably get into this later, but I can't think of 3 words. Like my word is European, which, as opposed to you girls, like I am just, yes, I have different nationalities and cultures, but they are all European. But it's something like that hasn't changed, but I guess I've learned to embrace it more.
Got
And
it.
no, maybe weaknesses is the wrong word, but what I'm missing from it, not being monocultural, but also all the strengths and all the benefits that we get from it.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And actually, that was like my next question for you, Maureen. But it's awesome because you just answered it. I think it was about if you ever felt like you could adapt to almost any European environment, but yet you never fully belong in a single one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially with my parents being, even though my dad is half French, so I think he doesn't particularly feel very British, but there is very much that British culture, and then my mum being Italian.
Right.
I think I have a kind of foot in both the North and the South, and I see it even in, I do European international work, and I see that I'm able to adapt to people from those different cultures in a way that they sometimes clash together, even just like in terms of timekeeping. Like I have this joke all the time. The Nordics show up 15 minutes early for a meeting. The Italians are half an hour late because they're getting their coffee outside. Drives each other crazy, but I get both sides and I'm able to kind of navigate both sides.
My other question is for both of you, so you can pick whoever wants to go first, but when have you felt most at home? And what creates the sense of home for you? Was it people, objects, things, environment? Or was it more based on just your environment, like where you were living?
I can go first. Because I've moved around a lot, both in my childhood and later on, just with every step of the way, I made a different decision. And I've lived in, California, Paris, DC, Munich, and now Atlanta. So in every place living like 4 or 5 years. And when I go back to all of those places, they feel like home. So and it doesn't even matter that it's been 20 years, 15, 5, you arrive somewhere and you just know that you're feeling at home there. So for me, it's beyond language and culture. I think it's really about where you've spent significant time.
I find both your answers so interesting because mine is different. I thought we'd have the same answer and we don't. Because mine is people. It's not a tangible object. I mean, the closest I would get to that is maybe photos. And, like I love photos. I will always have like photo frames of us because of the memories attached to it. Paris being the exception. Paris, for some reason, even 20 years after we were there, is the love of my life, if you can have that with a city. And I have so many friends who don't understand that. I'll step off the platform, get off the train, and I feel like I'm home. But for me, home is people. And it's people, again, like you guys, that meeting other people who are like us, who, have just got these multiple identities and, different cultures and cross cultures. When I'm with people like that, that's when I feel at home.
Yeah. I can see that. And I agree with your answer too a little bit. It does make sense for me to also, when I'm with people who've had a similar kind of lifestyle or different moving around, I would say I just feel naturally gravitated towards them. And there is a little bit of a deeper understanding that you don't have to explain yourself. Like people just kind of, if you just say, oh, I was born here, but my family origins are here and I live here and then I studied here, people are like, oh, okay, like that's cool. There's just a little bit more openness to accepting the fact that like you're so different, and they're not going to try and box you up, which is what I found a little bit difficult when I first moved to the US when I was very young. And I think that was something that I constantly kind of battled with just in my younger years. So yeah,
like I feel you both know the dread that comes with the innocent question. So where are you from?
Yes.
I hate that question. It's horrible.
Absolutely.
It actually gives me anxiety.
But I agree.
So you're
I don't
already
like that
picking
question.
and choosing what part of yourself do you give to them.
Well, listen, Maureen, I think you're psychic because you're literally going through my questions before I'm even asking them. And it's pretty crazy because literally my next question was, do you ever feel like you're performing different versions of yourself in different cultural contexts? I feel like I have a lot of different versions, so it's natural that I would pull on different aspects of my life to connect with people wherever I am.
I agree. But I think this is going back to what I was saying before, that it's taken me 20 years to appreciate it about myself, because I think it's something, yes, that I say but probably all of us, we do naturally because we've done it our entire lives. We probably don't even realize when we're doing it. To the extent I know even my accent changes depending who I'm talking to. But learning to, I guess, to set boundary, like, if you know that you're doing it or you're doing it naturally to make the other person feel comfortable, great. But I felt for me for a long time, I was trying to fit in. I was almost denying my identity as being multicultural and trying to just be one thing or another thing, and ultimately feeling dissatisfied because you're not just one thing.
And did that come from you wanting to like belong and feel like you really belong somewhere?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think it's that sense of not meeting. And that again, why Paris was such a seismic year, because I finally met other people who were like me, to be with people that understand those different parts of yourself. It's someone who they've spent their entire life
Right.
being one person in one situation, another person in another. And with us, when you're adding in linguistically as well, like, I don't know about you, but I'm a different person when I'm speaking French and when I'm speaking Italian.
Yes.
And it was interesting, like, how can you use that as a positive, as an advantage, rather than it being a negative.
Right. And I would add, I don't even think it's like we calculate it. I think it's just natural. It comes out naturally.
Yeah.
You know, like when I'm in India, I know my husband and my kids always notice when I'm talking to my friends or family in Delhi that I have like a little bit of like an accent, even though I never lived there and I really don't know why I have this accent, but it kind of comes out. And then when I go to Bangkok and I'm talking to friends, you know, from Asia, sometimes like my English turns a little bit into that accent after a few days. And I think the kids think it's hilarious. And my husband, you know, definitely pokes fun of me and makes fun of me because it's just, it's obvious to them. Whereas for me, it feels almost natural and I'm not really thinking about it. It just happens. But Maureen, I have a question for you. So being Italian and British, you know, and a little bit of French, I mean, what was it like for you sort of growing up in Brussels? And what is it like for you when you're with one of those cultures? Like, let's say in an environment that's very Italian. Did you find it and do you still find it sometimes a little bit tricky? Do you feel like you belong now just because maybe you're more comfortable with yourself? How do you navigate that?
I'm more comfortable being who I am. And yeah, going back to what, like, I think this will be the sort of the line throughout what the thread of what I'm saying, that I think before, because maybe I'm a people pleaser and I wanted to belong and I wanted to find roots and figure, you know, when you're figuring out who you are, I would try to be in a British setting, British, in an Italian setting, Italian. Whereas if I'm with, you know, I don't know, Mexicans or something, I could probably weirdly be more myself because I didn't have to try to pretend to be Mexican.
Totally.
But, and I'd say when I'm with other non-Brits, I would probably say more I'm British, but when I'm with Brits, I don't feel as British as them. The same with Italians. I don't feel quite as Italian as them. And again, this is going back to monocultural people who don't understand. You're either one of them or you're not.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you're right. I think it's about also just being more authentically like who you are. Because also as we get older, I think we've just become more confident in who we are. When we were 20, we were kind of still figuring it out. You know, we weren't quite sure. And we were also going through so many experiences, like every day. I felt like we were growing so quickly into who we were going to be.
I even wonder if we would not be the same people without that experience of having met
I
each
don't think
other and
so.
having gone through that curriculum. And it really was very special to connect with like-minded people.
Yeah.
But
And then Annick, like,
yeah.
oh, sorry, go
Oh,
on.
I just wanted to comment on or echo on what Maureen said, because I do feel like my voice sounds different, whether I'm speaking French, English, or even later on when I learned German. Just speaking German to other people, I realized, like, whoa, this is a new facet of myself that I never knew existed. And it is almost like a little bit of a split personality. I mean, I'm the same person, but the humor is not the same in every language. The way you interact with people is not the same. So you're just slightly different based on which language you're
Yeah.
speaking.
I
It's
mean,
really weird. Yeah.
yeah. And then when I get to France, and you know how their compliment is like a negative statement, but like they know how to say it. So it's like a compliment, but it just comes off a little bit negative. Like that would never bother me. Like I would take it as a compliment. Like I understood that humor so well. But maybe
Right.
because my English was American English, I didn't get the British English humor as much. But Annick, my question for you also is, you know, being Mexican, French, and being at Sciences Po, how was it like for you? Because you were half French. I mean, we weren't French, so I kind of got away with being the foreigner. Whereas I think in the foreign exchange student, I think for you though, it was a little bit more trickier. And I'd love to hear, you know, how you
Yeah.
navigated that.
Well, I guess it was also really tricky because it was at a time where my identity wasn't fully formed. As we've just discussed, I was still trying to figure out, am I more French? Am I more American? And how do I integrate this whole Mexican part that was a big influence in my childhood? So I will say that it was a really, really hard year for me because I actually lost a lot of confidence being around that academic environment because I guess I had always prided myself in having preserved my French at a very high level because when I got to university in California, I took French literature, I read a lot of books, and then I got there and my grades were awful. I had never done so poorly in my entire life. And I think we're all nodding in unison, like, yes, this
Yeah,
was a really, really difficult
it's
year.
really hard.
And the teachers, because hearing me speak French, they thought I was well, I am a native speaker, but in my writing quality, they just butchered my texts. And so I was having some really difficult discussions. It was just really, really rough. From an identity perspective, I also felt that, yeah, I was learning that I didn't fully fit in, as Maureen just described. With if you're with only Brits or only Italians, and in my case with only French, I always felt slightly off the mark. So yeah, it was a really mixed bag, and I maybe that hardship pushed me to grow, but it really was also a confidence killer, I have to say.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, when you grow up and you mentioned like when you were moving back to the US when you were, I think, 12 or 13? I think your story's a little bit different. I'd love for you to share why you were moving around so much in your younger years.
Yeah, so my mom being Mexican American, and she had some roots in California, and my dad in France. I can't tell you how many times we moved back and forth, and it was really always just this desire of the grass is always greener on the other side. Maybe our life will be better in one over the other. So I think they kept testing it out, and especially with having three kids, I think they were really drawn to France with the social system and all the support. And we didn't have a lot of money. So obviously, there's so much social financial support for families in France. We did get to a point where there were not a lot of job opportunities where we were in the south of France. And we took the decision to move back to California. Just again, the US being the land of prosperity for ever and ever, and it still is to a certain extent. So going to find work over there. So I do think that moving for, let's say, trying to find a better life for your kids or economic prosperity is maybe that's also why I have this thing with France where I have some kind of heartache that I had to leave it because it wasn't my choice to move, right? I
Mm.
had to move with my parents, and I was probably not prepared for that as a teenager. But I always have had ever since this longing and this ache to live in France, and I miss France so much. And I think it's because if you haven't made the decision yourself to leave
Right.
and to go somewhere better, it's yeah, it's like a sad story, right?
Yeah, it's like you get taken away. Like when I moved to the US from Japan, I was 4.5, 5, and it certainly was not my choice. I was really happy there, and it took me years to adjust to the US. And I was young. I mean, you were older. I was 4.5, 5, and I remember for at least 3 years being quite miserable.
But see, even hearing you say that, Assis, is so comforting to me. And this is, I think, why our friendship is so special because there are a lot of people who just don't understand what that's like. And it's such a deep wound that we all carry, I even sometimes say that I'm displaced, even though that's such a terrible term. I should never say that because people around the world are suffering much more. But it's just that, yeah, that longing for something that was taken away from
Right.
you. When I moved to LA at 12, I was also I don't even know if I ever got over it, but it took me years to feel comfortable there. And I also arrived, my siblings and I were speaking French to each other. We did not speak much English. We understood it, of course, but I also like to remind people sometimes that when I arrived, I was actually in ESL, in English as a second language, and relearning, like, how do you say flower? How do you say horse? How do you say? It only took a year to
Right.
get, because it was in the back of my head and I just needed to get it out. But it was still a process. It was
Yeah,
really
and the
hard.
vocabulary, I mean, if you're not using vocabulary and you're not hearing words often, I mean, it does get lost. It doesn't mean it's completely forgotten, but it's not something that you can just comes out on the tip of your tongue, and it's tough. It's an adjustment,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think what you're describing is a little bit of like a cultural homelessness,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, like you kind of have this like multicultural identity, but I think in sometimes it could be abundance or it can be like an absence.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting because right now what you're describing, it sounds like it was also an absence.
Totally. Totally. you sometimes feel like you had a home and then you left a home. You have to recreate a new home, and it sounds like you had that with Japan too. And
Yeah.
that's, it's
And it's
hard.
and it's funny because, I think for me, Japan is still home. Then of course there's home with my family, which is, my husband and kids, which is here in New York. But for me, Paris is more of a identity home. Like when I
Mm,
get to Paris, and I think Maureen, maybe you alluded to this earlier, I really feel like my spirit comes alive. And I'm almost like the best version of me, or even unstoppable intellectually and just professionally when I'm in Paris. It's like a confidence that comes out. I feel like I'm just like, I'm on point.
Well, you know what, Assis, maybe you're reconnecting with that part of you that was like in your peak, because you mentioned it earlier, that intellectual stimulation. So just being there is reconnecting with that part of you.
Yeah, I think you're right. But then I have this like rich and vast experience that really has introduced me to people like you guys who we've been so lucky because we've actually managed to maintain our friendships. And
Yes.
a big part of that, I would even say, was the fact that I felt when I met you guys, I felt like I belonged amongst others, right? That feeling, that like really belonging. And I don't know. I mean, Maureen, you tell me, like, with being in Brussels and being in the EU and being European, did you find that it was easier to kind of have this pan-European identity? Or did you find it still kind of like blocked you in Brussels? Let's say when you were not just in a British environment or Italian.
Yeah, it's so, like, as I said, when I was in high school, and then I suppose you don't really know any differently. You're not an adult yet. You're not really living your life yet, or maybe I was privileged in that I had a good experience there. Most, there were very few people who were just of one nationality. And even few, I mean, we were
Right.
all in Belgium, and even fewer who were of just one nationality, and that nationality was Belgian. So kind of de facto, we were all sort of a bit mixed, and it was just normal because, as I said, we didn't know any differently. But certainly when I speak to other friend, I've got another friend who, she's actually fully British, but she was born in Japan like you, Aziz, and then moved to Belgium afterwards. And she also wanted to go back and study in the UK for the same reason as me, that we also wanted to explore that part of ourselves. And both of us were like, oh no, this isn't right for us at all, in a way that we were quite shocked with because we'd not been confronted with that before. But now when I'm back in Brussels as an adult, and yes, I'm still meeting expats, I'm still meeting people who aren't Belgian and who maybe they have a spouse from a different nationality. They're maybe bringing up kids here who are going to be like me, cross
Right.
culture, third culture kids. But they themselves are not necessarily third culture. And
Right.
although we're still friends because, as I was saying before, they're at least people they've moved abroad, they have their mind is sort of open to, what that can be like to live in different places.
Right.
They still have roots.
Yeah.
And I feel that is still not changing. I'm still not meeting so many people like us who, or we certainly have different roots in different places. And even in somewhere like Brussels, in a European bubble environment, I think with each generation, it's probably going to become more prominent.
Yeah.
But I'm still not seeing it as much as I thought I might.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. What do you think monocultural people most misunderstand about the experience of third culture kids or having multiple, identities, cultural identities?
I mean, if I could, so I'm jumping in
Go ahead.
again.
No, no,
But
go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
I'm thinking.
the second question, I mean, I get this question less often. I used to get it a lot at university, but the other question I hate is I'd have a lot of Brits. They would ask me, what was it like growing up abroad? I'm like, how am I meant to answer that question? And it wasn't meant as an insult. It was actually came from a place of curiosity and wanting to
Right.
learn more.
Right.
But it was like, you don't get it. And I feel that it's that kind of, I envy people in a way who are monocultural, they know where their roots are.
Yeah.
They've got all their friends, all their family in the same place. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, I've got friends around the world. Like, what a privilege. Even if we don't see each other all the time, we're still in touch. I mean, I don't know any differently.
Right.
But I think they see it. I think they see two different parts of us. They're either like, we're the exotic travelers and our lives must be so interesting. They're just from place X, as their parents were, as their grandparents were. But they're also like, oh, you have no roots. we're from place X as my grandparents were. And they think that we're big adventurers and they can be a bit jealous. But at the end of the day, I feel they're still happy to get home to their monocultural place. And that for me is the big divide, that I never feel quite understood.
Yeah. And I will say, I think I understand what you're saying. And for me, in times of crises, I did sometimes wish when I was in London and Belgium and Paris, like when I was going through stuff that, oh, I wish someone here was like Indian and they just kind of understood it, because that's when I would almost miss it, is when I was in a problem and I realized my family was really far away and there weren't people who got like my home culture or a big part of my home culture, right? Which was being Indian. So for me, it's funny because when you're made up of so many different things, you pull on all of those things, and obviously it's really enriching, but it can also be lonely, when
It can, yes.
And I think when I met you guys, and at that time in our life, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like we found our people, like what Maureen said earlier. It was just, we found each other and we got each other, and I thought that was really special, to find people who just got each other.
I want to add to something Maureen said about not being fully understood. So when I'm with monocultural people, I consciously am kind of toning myself down, if that makes sense. Like with you guys, I'm just very comfortable being my full self. I feel understood. And there's this always, and it's not necessary. I don't even think anybody's judging me. This is all in my head. But I feel like there's a little bit of that. I'm trying to tone myself down because I don't want to come off as a snob, if that makes sense. Like, oh, I'm from all these places and I've had all these experiences.
Absolutely.
And it's like, I think some people can feel intimidated by that, or I don't know. So I just tend to, I hate to say it this way, but I'm a little bit of a smaller version of myself with monocultural friends. And we can still connect in all kinds of ways, but I'm not going to be 100% me.
You. Yeah. That's really powerful what you said, Annick. I've been reading
Great.
about that, actually, about third culture kids. That's a very common feeling.
But it makes it complicated to form friendships that way,
Yeah. Also because I felt like I was almost an object of fascination versus like a person, because they were just like, oh my God, you're like so different, and it's interesting, but it's not always the best feeling when you kind of feel like people are just trying to like when you're more of a specimen than a person. And that's how I felt a couple of times. But
yeah, I think it was something I was thinking about as well, and I'm sure Annick maybe we'll get into this too, but to me, you don't want to be put on a pedestal either. And I had this with an ex-boyfriend who was very monocultural, and I could see I was the exotic specimen, and it's, which is lovely. It came from a place of love, but it didn't come from a place of understanding. And I think, it is possible. Obviously, like, we can form bonds with monocultural people, but we don't want to be seen as different, where we're just who we are.
Just accept me for who I am, all the parts.
And Annick, I think you can really speak to this because you're married to someone who's from a monoculture. But do you think maybe marrying someone from one culture and from one place was like a subconscious decision because you were from so many different places? Maybe that's something that you were attracted to?
Yeah, so I think it was subconscious. So my husband is from Germany, and not only that, he's from a very small village, and multi-generations in his family have been from the same like 30-kilometer radius. So if you talk about having a home, he has a very, very well-defined, secure home. And maybe that also comes out in his personality, or what attracted me to him. He's a very grounding person. He feels very safe. And I think I maybe subconsciously did not want to further complicate my home life with even more languages. Although, of course, at the time I didn't factor in that I would eventually need to learn German, which was a huge undertaking. Almost killed me, but I survived. So yeah, I think that there's definitely a connection there. But at the same time, we have had to grow together for him, like we were just saying, to understand who I really am, all the parts of me. And that was a process. It took many years. It took him meeting every part of my family, going to all these homes that I have.
And being open-minded, I feel. He had to probably really open his mind that you...
Yes.
in a
I can
different way.
I can guarantee you that in the beginning when we were dating, it for him that was very new. I don't think he had met anyone like me before, and he was I think trying to put me in these boxes, and I kept having to have those conversations, and I think he finally got there.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm married to somebody who's a Sikh Punjabi guy, and I think a part of my attraction for him too was that he was grounded in our cult, in not just being a Sikh, because I definitely wanted to marry a Sikh person, but he was like Punjabi and Indian, and I found that to be grounding. At least my kids will know, like, exactly who they come from, and I think that's important. They know what they come from, and that was something I wanted to give my kids, because I think I could see how that would be useful in life, going through life, and it's nice to know kind of your roots.
Yeah,
It's very
that's
grounding.
word,
Yeah.
yeah. But can I just jump in on something Annick
Yeah.
said, which it's just, yeah, like brought something up in me when you were saying he was trying to put you in different boxes, or you were showing him boxes, but we don't even have boxes because there's so many and they're all blending into
Intertwined.
each other. Exactly. And I find this is actually something that people, and it doesn't come from a bad place, it just comes from a place where they don't know differently. They always want to put me in a box. And it's like, what box are you? Is it the British? Is it the Italian? It's like, why do I have to be in a box?
Wait, so Maureen, are you saying that you felt this way in Brussels with like pan-Europeans, or just with, like, what's that word? People from one culture.
Monocultural, yeah.
Yeah, back in Brussels, I feel people want to place you. And I think it's because they're trying to understand you. And I can't even place myself. So good luck if you're going to try.
Yeah.
But I do see
Yeah.
it even apart from, as I say, when I meet people who are like us, who also know that they can't be placed, they will never try to do it. They wouldn't even think of doing it. But it's a minority.
Like, I feel that, when we were working in Brussels, or when you were in Paris, Annick, I did feel like sometimes they'd be like, oh, that person's like this because, they're Italian, or that person's, they're so Greek about it, or whatever it is. Like, I was actually surprised, and it was interesting to hear your experience feeling boxed in, because that's exactly how I felt growing up in the US. I felt like people were trying to box me, and I'm not someone who can be boxed in. It's not who I am, and I don't like a set of expectations placed on me. I don't like the idea that someone knows how I'm going to behave in a situation. Like, unless you know me, you don't know what I'm going to do, and you don't know how I'm going to react. Or also expect me, because I look a certain way, to take certain behaviors. And that was something that I think was more recently discovered as a grown woman, and a mother and a wife. I think that to me was like the most frustrating, probably, was that people expected things of you, and expected you, maybe even because of your cultural background, to accept certain things. And that was like a very interesting thing for me, because it wasn't how I grew up, but I felt very boxed in, for sure.
Wow.
Okay, so should we change the topic? So this is more of a fun topic. So do you guys think people with multiple cultural identities have different expectations or needs in relationships?
Right, but this is it actually does kind of, I mean, this is an expectation, you could say, in the relationship, because we do spend way more time visiting family and visiting all these homes of where I come from versus like going on some lovely exotic vacation. So that's a big thing in the past years, and something I'm really thinking about, that we're not really doing that actually very much at all. It's when you're from all these places and you have family all over, you have to keep nurturing all those relationships. But I will say, yeah, I guess I need someone who's open-minded, generous, very accepting. I mentioned safe earlier. I still have a lot of insecurities around my identity, and I just need to be, yeah, loved in a safe place. That's really the
Yeah.
expectation.
Yeah, I think emotional safety in relationships is probably really important. I think it's important for all relationships, actually.
Yes, yes.
Lessons to younger selves and younger women and men out there. I mean, you really want to create a life with someone who's emotionally safe for you, and understands all of our nuances, right? I don't know if I appreciated it and realized how important it was when I was younger. I feel like that appreciation has come with age.
Absolutely. Yes.
and experience. What advice would you give your younger selves? And Maureen, I'm going to start with you.
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think a lot of it just comes through life experience. But I would say embrace who you are, all of it. Don't be afraid of exploring, but don't be afraid of embracing who you are, the full spectrum of who you are. And that's okay. And you are absolutely beautiful and who you're meant to be.
Yeah.
I love that, Maureen.
I love that,
Yeah.
Maureen. That's really powerful. And Annick, what about you? What would you say?
I would say that because of being multicultural, we are always navigating uncertainty. We're never sure exactly who we are. And like I said, it's a journey, it's a process. When we were younger, we were constantly trying to find the answer to that question. And I've learned to stop asking myself that question because there's simply no answer. And it doesn't matter. You're just all of those things. And as we've said a few times already, it's a gift. What we have really is a gift to be able to navigate different cultures. I think we are very open with people. I walk up to strangers constantly. I feel that I have that warmth because I just want to people to feel included. And yeah, it's just teaches you that really good lesson about life, that life is uncertain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also like being authentic and not being afraid of being your authentic self. And also to never abandon yourself. Don't ever turn your back on your 12-year-old self.
I love that.
And having multiple identities is beautiful, but know who you are and appreciate who you are. On that note, I think we should wrap up. And thank you guys for being here with us today. I love discussing our own third culture experiences and, what made us who we are. And of course, our friendship, which, I wish we were all in person right now.
I know.
I wish we were on Boulevard Saint-Germain, Le Montréal, just having a glass of wine.
Sipping a glass of rosé.
That would be so amazing.
Oh my God.
Please, let's do it.
And you guys are the best. And, I can't wait till we meet again in person. Thank
Such
you.
a nice conversation.
Bisous, bisous.
Bisous.